Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Bensavanga, and I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Central Florida.
And I'm Lucas. I go to Ohio Wesleyan University.
So today we're going to be talking more about our REU experience, our research experience for undergraduates over this past summer. So Citizen Science GIS has taken a group of students for the past 3 years down to Belize and has split them up into 3 different tracks and 3 different teams: the marine debris team, the flooding team, and the drones and spatial storytelling team. And Lucas and I were fortunate enough to be on the drones and spatial storytelling team. That's us in the corner, flying a drone and collecting imagery. So our main goal and our main objective was to conduct our research with the community that we serve. So part of our research was quantitative, and that was flying the drones and collecting the imagery, turning it into an orthomosaic. And the second part of our work was more qualitative, and that was focused on conducting interviews with people who live there and to gain a better understanding of some of the environmental changes that they're seeing. So Open Reef is a team of scientists that's committed to connecting science better with society, and that's where citizen science takes a big role as well. So Open Reef takes high-resolution imagery of vulnerable island areas. We analyze these island environments, and we do that with relatively affordable consumer-level drones, the DJI Phantom 4 Pro drones. And a big part of what we do is, once we collect that data and once we create the orthomosaics, once we digitize them, we want to have them as open data for the public to use. So we don't want to house all of that information and kind of have it locked up where only educators and student researchers can use it. We want it to be publicly available for everyone in Belize to use it where they see best fit. So a big question that we were asked as we started this program was, why should we examine the environmental changes that are happening in Belize? And a big one was to monitor change over time. One goal of Open Reef is to take this imagery more than one time. So over the years, we can create a really large database of different imagery over the years that we can better compare island environments to. So another goal is to learn from local knowledge on adaptation to the changing climate. Like Tim mentioned earlier, no matter how hard we try as researchers to understand the environment that we're going into, no one knows it better than the people who've lived there for 30, 40 years. So we like to keep that at the center and at the cornerstone of our work. To connect island and coastal communities, we like to compare and contrast how islanders and how people who are on coastal communities are adapting to changes like island erosion or sand shifting, because some people on the coastal communities might have different resources and abilities than people on islands. So that's a big thing. And also spreading awareness of vulnerable island communities, because satellite imagery can do a lot for you, depending on what you're working in. But for some of the islands off the coast of Belize, they're so small, and they can easily be covered by cloud coverage on satellite images, or like any image, like interference or errors in the imagery, you can lose a whole island, and that's really detrimental. So this is another example of Gladden Key. It's beautiful, but you can't really see it on the satellite imagery. This is an example of how the satellite imagery is poor resolution for smaller islands. It's outdated, there's some image errors, or there could be cloud interference. And that is our drone imagery overlaid right on top of it. Something that you can note from this image and something that you can see from our drone imagery is that the perimeter of the island has more mangrove cover than on the center of it. That can indicate to us that some mangrove clearing was done on the island. And if we monitor this island over time and we take drone imagery next year or in 5 years from now, you can monitor to see how the sands might have eroded away on the one side of the island where mangroves aren't there anymore. So, as Tim mentioned earlier, something that really left a profound impact on us as students was the humanity that we saw in every step of the way during our research. So, it's really easy to get caught up in flying the drones and loading everything onto a boat and going out early in the morning and launching the drone from the boat, and then you kind of stop and you talk to the people who you're interacting with, whether it be a boat captain or an islander or someone who's just watching over the island. Maybe they don't live there, but they have lived in Belize for a really long time. And to hear some of the stories that they say, or to hear them say how important the coast is to them, the reef, I mean, it's people's livelihoods, it's people's lives and their homes that's so important to them. So that's what really kind of humbled me, at least throughout every part of the research, because it took us a step back and made us realize just how important our research really was. So our three main research questions were focused on onshore changes, offshore changes, and how people are adapting to those changes. This is more of a timeline of our research. So it was a 7-week program that we participated in, and 5 of those weeks were in Belize. The first week was in Orlando. Like I said, this was through the University of Central Florida, funded by the NSF. So the first week was an intensive week of developing our research questions, doing literature reviews, that kind of stuff. Weeks 2 through 6 were in Belize. We were flying drones, collecting imagery, processing most of that imagery on our laptops at night and charging batteries. And then week 7 was a week of data analysis and the presentation of our results. Our methodology was twofold, both quantitative and qualitative and quantitative. Like I mentioned before, our qualitative were our interviews that we conducted with people. Those were all recorded interviews, and they were more on the lengthy side, like 20-minute interviews. They were mostly conversations, because we found that having conversational interviews was more of a laid-back kind of interview conduct, but we got a lot of information on like the history of areas. So, and then our quantitative was our digitized drone imagery. We would take we would collect imagery from the DJI Phantom 4 Pro drones, and then take all of those images, process them in Drone2Map, and then upload them to ArcGIS Online, digitize over them, like island attributes, like island boundaries, seawalls, any structures, docks, and renewable energy sources like solar panels. And then those were uploaded online and made public for people to access. So this is an example of one of our digitized maps of Little Water Key. And you can see the island boundary. You can see the dock in the upper right-hand corner. And you can see some structures and renewable energy sources as well. Our interview methods model.
You want me to take over? I guess. All right. So some of our interview model, like when we were in Orlando for the first week, we really wanted to establish some sort of code, something that we could kind of base our questions or conversations around. And so then we actually went to Belize, collected some responses, and then during our analysis part, we wanted to prioritize interviews that we kind of had imagery for as well, so we could kind of match the two up to kind of create this whole story. And so then actually when we were back, we wanted to review and establish like emerging codes. That's how we prioritized it and then eventually analyzed it. So here's just a data summary of kind of what we digitized. So we digitized over 160 different structures, over 40 different renewable energy resources, primarily solar panels, almost 40 docks, and about 20 different seawalls. And we were able to digitize 958,592.21 square meters of like total area. And so during our time in Belize, we were able to map 52 different areas. So 47 keys or islands, 2 coastal areas, one being Hopkins Village and the other Monkey River Village, 1 reef system, 1 channel, and 1 surrounding seascape. As we were flying, we were also conducting interviews. We conducted 39 with different kinds of locals, such as island caretakers, researchers, fishermen, island owners, tour guides, and just regular citizens of Belize. And so some of our key findings really comes with how we combined the power of the drones with the local knowledge of the islanders. So to tie that back into our research questions, first what we're going to look at is the environmental changes on the islands themselves. So as you can see, this is one of our infographics made by one of our team members, Darby Relia. As you can see, there are some vegetation on it, but it is being definitely cleared of mangrove for island development. The changes in weather, so like some of the sand has shifted over time, as well as they've seen a lot of erosion as well on the island. So with the drone, so this is an example of Isabella Key. I believe it was in Tim's talk earlier. So definitely different from what's around it, right? What's around it is all mangrove, and which is exactly what this island used to be. But with the power of the local knowledges, we can actually understand kind of what's going on here. So this is all illegal development in Belize. Yeah, it's kind of shocking. And they fit like over 90 structures just on this teeny little island. So through our imagery, again, we can detect island erosion over time on the island. Obviously, the change in land use, now it's a resort. And then just the shape of the island as it changes over time. So research question number 2. How are the locals adapting to change? So to combat some of the changes on the islands, primarily dealing with erosion, we saw a lot of different seawalls. Some of the seawalls being tires and conch shells, as Tim said earlier. We also recognized that some island caretakers were planting trees or reestablishing mangroves around the island to help give it another extra barrier. Another thing that was also brought up was dredging and importing sand. So like as the sand goes away, erodes away, they just dredge some sand out of somewhere else and bring it back in, try to reestablish their island again. And then with the drone here, so we have Starfish Island here. You can see it's pretty much covered all in seawalls. And so they actually have planted some vegetation on it, but really nothing that will help keep it structurally sound. And again, without the local knowledge, we wouldn't understand what this island really is. It's completely man-made. We would have had no idea like why this island is here without that local knowledge. And we can understand now like it's not supposed to be here, and that's why we can tell like how much it's eroding away and how quickly, just because it's not supposed to be there. And so just north of this area is where they actually dredged the sand and literally just dumped it here, right? And as it gets eroding away, they're dredging more sand and dumping it again. And it's just a continuum process. So for research question 3, so offshore changes. There was a lot of effects on tourism, especially with the reef system. Obviously, if people are swimming in the waters, not taking care of, the reef systems, not being careful, they're going to damage these precious coral reef. Also, a lot of waste, too. So lots of trash can get trapped in the ocean and kind of devastate this local ecosystem. As long as weather and climate pattern changes, we saw as well. So here we have Laughing Bird Key. We have some quotes from some researchers that were doing some work in there. So like there was a huge hurricane that just wrecked a huge part of this local reef system. And so now they're trying to reestablish it back, and they're doing pretty well, actually. Also, some more offshore changes. So some changes in the fish patterns. We see some fishermen notice that fish aren't where they're supposed to be, and there's not an abundance of fish anymore. They're definitely depleting in population size. And then again, reef health is another huge issue that was seen offshore.
In addition to like population size of the fish, fishermen had also stated that like the actual size of the fish that they remember, 15 years ago, the average fish size that you saw was, 1.5 times bigger or something like that. So that was something else that was interesting that we found.
And so with the drone, we were able to capture some of the reef systems around the keys. As you can see here, we have a picture of some sargassum and lots of plastic trash. Not good for the local ecosystem and just not good in general. So some preliminary conclusions we have based on some of our interviews is that 70% of the people that we talked to and coded interviews for said, over 70% said that they saw erosion on either their island that they know or staying on or other islands around them. 50%, or more than 50%, said that weather and climate, now let's say are increasing in storms, but the severity of the storms are getting worse and worse every year. And that's eroding their islands a lot faster. And then the tourism industry as well. So they need to clear out mangroves, put in a resort. That's very detrimental to this local ecosystem. Also, again, fish patterns and reef health were also mentioned as well. And then for adaptations, we heard over 50% of who we interviewed mentioned that they have seen seawalls, or if they try to implement seawalls onto their islands. And over 40% recognized dredging and the importation of sand to islands. And then 20% mentioned that they planted vegetation back onto their islands to help kind of keep it structurally sound again, like around the shorelines. So some limitations that we kind of ran into were our time constraints. So we weren't in Belize all that long, although it felt forever. But also some more time constraints is the time which we were flying. As you can see here, we've got a lot of glint coming off the local reef over on the water. So that was one thing. Another thing with prioritizing data, we wanted to make sure we could get as much as possible together. So we wanted to prioritize what islands we had interviews for, what islands we mapped, just make sure we had as much data that was kind of compatible as well. And the same with digitizing. We weren't able to digitize a lot just because we didn't have as much time as we would have liked. And so for future directions, there is one more year for this NSF RU to continue the OpenReef work. And again, as they go out and do more flying and drone mapping, they will continue to conduct more interviews, as well as train more locals and community partners. Dirk and Asani, as Tim mentioned, were huge assets for our team when we were in Hopkins. I remember Asani was with me at 6 a.m. mapping out their village, which was awesome. He even helped draw some of the pictures to map out, just make sure, oh, we should definitely get that area over there. There's some stuff going on over there and I would have never known. And so he was a huge help. And then just continue to add open data, add data to our open data site for OpenReef.
I wanted to make one more note now that I'm back. Continuing adding to the open data site, I'm fortunate enough to still be at the University of Central Florida, so I've been working on processing and uploading more of the digitized maps that we've collected imagery for over the summer. And I think that's a big part of OpenReef, something about our methodology that is very replicable. Hopefully that by the time that I graduate and I train more people under me to continue that work, to continue uploading and hopefully get to all of the islands that are off the coast of Belize. So yeah, thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Great job. We have any questions for our presenters here?
No.
No questions. I have a question. I've heard a lot about this open data, OpenReef site. How do I get there? I mean, where can I start to learn more about that? Is there a website?
Yes, we have a website and we're working on an open data website. And if you go to our website, citizenscigis.org, you can be taken to that from there. There's a link that you can click and it'll take you to our open data site.
We can get to your open data site and see all the work that you guys have been doing. Great.
Or you can go to Arc Online and just type OpenReef and then all of our imagery will come up.
Perfect. Thank you. That's extremely helpful. We got questions here. Sorry. No, you're good.
Hello. Can you guys tell me what it would cost, or have any idea what an overflight using an aircraft for collection of high-resolution data would cost? I mean, ballpark, to cover all those atolls and small islands? I mean, the drone imagery is amazing, but it seems like the cost effectiveness or the workload is so much more significant. Do you know what you could cover in a day, or what the cost would be to do it with a multispectral instrument on an aircraft?
That I don't know. But again, as we train more local community members, they can do it whenever they want. And right after a storm, maybe they can just quickly wake up, pop on the propellers of the drone, fly it up, see what's going on. Versus where you have to get an aircraft, you get a pilot, right? You have to get all the right equipment, fuel, all that kind of stuff. So it might be a little bit easier, to do that, but realistically, like if there was an emergency, you want to fly the drone out really quick, that's probably going to be the quickest way to do that.
Got it, thanks.
Sorry.
I was just wondering about the people who are telling you some of their historical memories of things. Do you have an age, and was it primarily more of the young kids, or middle, or college, or were there any of the older grannies telling you things? Just interesting.
I would say the age was huge. So like we had like very, I don't want to say like old, but we did have older people that told us just incredible stories about these different islands. You know, and then kids, one of our boat captains, Kevin, was really awesome. He's lived on the island since he was born. He was literally born on the island. Although 20 years old, still got 20 years of experience on these islands.
Sometimes, so my husband's Belizean, and I did research and lived there, and I know Belizeans, and they tell really good tales as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
at times, I'm not kidding. That's you know what unbelievable means, right? So, do you have to kind of get a little reference on some of your stories that are going into your qualitative data as a anthropologist background? Something to think about.
Yeah, I think during the interviews and during their process of telling us their story, we would usually ask, kind of on their own, they would give points of reference or like, oh yeah, during Hurricane so-and-so, this is what this happened, and oh, I lost 10 feet of shoreline. But what's interesting about the work that we do is that you could go and then fly the drone and see that 10 feet of shoreline of where it truly used to be. So that answers your question. Thank you.
I've got one more question. How many areas have you repeated as far as the surveying goes? Have you gone and compared the difference of one flight to another in an area and done anything like that yet?
We have. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think it's between somewhere like 10 and 15 islands that have been repeated. This past year over the REU, though, we flew mostly new areas. So.
Great. Thank you. Let's give them another round of applause.